Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Over the last couple of weeks, you've had the opportunity to work through modules 3 and 4. Today, we'll spend our time exploring some of the questions that often arise as people begin applying these ideas in real life. Before we jump into the questions, I want to begin with a thought. Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought, why did I say that? Or perhaps, I knew better than that. Maybe it was with a spouse, a child, a friend, a coworker, or someone you deeply care about. And afterward, you found yourself thinking, that wasn't the response I wanted to have. Many people assume the problem is that they don't know what to do. But often, that's not true. Often we already know. We know we want to be patient. We know we want to listen. We know we want to be kind. We know we want to respond thoughtfully. The challenge is not always knowing. The challenge is living from what we know in the moments that matter most. And that's exactly why modules 3 and 4 are so important. Knowing who we are is important. Knowing what matters to us is important. Knowing our values is important. But eventually, life asks a different question. Can we live from what we know? Can we stay aligned with who we want to be when emotions are strong? When pressure rises? When someone disappoints us? When life doesn't go according to plan? That is where awareness and boundaries become so important. When we talk about awareness, we're talking about something much larger than simply noticing emotions. We're learning to see more clearly, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We're learning to better understand what is happening within us and around us. To discern what is true, what is influencing us, what matters most, and what may be needed in the moment. Because when we can see more clearly, we can choose more intentionally. Awareness helps us notice what is happening, not just emotionally, but mentally, relationally, spiritually. Awareness helps us recognize what is influencing us, what is driving us, what is pulling us toward reaction. And boundaries help us choose how we want to respond. Awareness creates space, and within that space, choice becomes possible. As I was reflecting on everything we've covered in level 1 so far, I kept coming back to a simple idea. Awareness creates space. Space to notice what we do, space to know who we are, and space to see who we are becoming. When we began this journey, many of us were focused on what we were doing, our reactions, our emotions, our habits. Then we began exploring something deeper, who we are, what matters to us, what we value, what is true about us. And as we continue moving forward, we begin looking toward who we are becoming, the direction we are moving, the life we are creating, the person we're choosing to become. In many ways, that's the journey of level 1. You may notice that level 1 begins with identity and values, even though this framework is often described as notice what we do, know who we are, see who we are becoming. That's intentional, because in real life, these 3 things are constantly influencing one another. Sometimes awareness helps us notice what we do. Sometimes awareness helps us know who we are. Sometimes awareness helps us see who we are becoming. And often one leads naturally to the others. For example, I know I value patience. Then I notice how impatient I become in a difficult moment. That awareness helps me know myself more deeply, and it helps me see the kind of person I am becoming if I continue that pattern. All 3 are happening together. Identity and values do not eliminate the need for awareness. They give awareness meaning. They give awareness direction. Because awareness helps us see what is happening, identity and values help us understand why it matters. And they help us choose what we want to do with what we see. And awareness helps us live more intentionally from what we know to be true. That's why level 1 begins with identity and values, not because they come first in every situation, but because they provide a foundation for understanding everything else. Today, as we walk through these questions, listen for those connections. What are you noticing? What are you learning about yourself? And what might this be teaching you about who you are becoming? Let's begin. Question 1. What if I don't notice my emotions until after I've already reacted? Many people experience this first. We understand the idea of pausing, but in the moment, everything happens too quickly. And afterward, we think, why did I react like that? And for many of us, that's exactly where this begins. That moment after the reaction is actually more important than it seems, because noticing after the fact is not failure. It's the first stage of awareness. Most of us were never taught to recognize emotions in real time. So the first shift is simply this. We can see it now. And if we can see it after, we will begin to see it during. So instead of asking, why didn't I get it right? We begin asking, what did I notice? That's how we move forward. Question 2. What if my emotions feel too strong in the moment? Many people feel this next. Even when we're understanding what's happening, our emotions still feel intense, fast, overwhelming. And for many of us, this is where the struggle becomes real. We think, I know what to do, but it still feels like too much. This is where one of the most important truths comes in. Emotions are not problems. They are signals. They're telling us something matters, something needs attention, something may be out of alignment. Many people react to strong emotions in familiar ways, pushing them down, letting them spill over, or avoiding them. And for many of us, we can recognize one of those patterns. This is where we begin doing something different. We're not trying to eliminate emotions. We're learning to stay present with them long enough to choose a response. When we're learning to listen without being controlled. Question 3. How do I actually pause when everything happens so quickly? Many people hear pause and think it should be simple. But in real life, it rarely feels that way. And for many of us, this is where it feels frustrating because we understand the idea, but can't seem to do it consistently. So let's reframe it. Pause is not something we either have or don't have. It's something we build, something we learn. And this is where we begin using the 4 N's. We name what we feel, and that slows the mind. We notice the body, and that brings us out of autopilot. We normalize, and that reduces resistance. And then we navigate. At first, that pause may only be a second, but that second is where everything begins to change, because that's where we move from reaction to response. Question 4. What if I've been suppressing, avoiding, or exploding emotions for most of my life? Many people recognize themselves here. Sometimes quietly, we begin to see patterns: suppression, explosion, avoidance. And for many of us, there can be a moment of, oh, this is me. If you've noticed that, it's important to understand something. Those patterns are not failures. They were strategies. At some point, they made sense. They may have helped us stay safe, avoid contention, keep things functioning. But now we're learning something new. And what we've learned in the past, we can also unlearn. We don't need to change everything at once. We begin with awareness, and then we take small steps forward. And as those small steps are practiced consistently, something begins to shift. We start noticing earlier. We pause more often. We respond a little differently than we did before. And over time, those small shifts begin to change the pattern itself. Question 5. How do I know if I'm reacting or responding? Many people begin wondering this. We want to know, am I doing this right? So here's a simple way to think about it. A reaction is fast, automatic, driven by emotion. A response is aware, intentional, aligned with what matters most. And for many of us, the most important realization is this. If there was even a brief moment where we noticed what we were feeling before we acted, we were already moving toward response, even if it wasn't perfect. As we begin to notice our emotions, we also begin to see how they affect our lives, our time, our energy, our relationships. And that leads us into Module 4. Question number 6. How do I set boundaries without feeling selfish or guilty? Many of us feel that tension. We understand boundaries, but they still feel uncomfortable. We think, I'm letting people down. And for many of us, that feeling runs deep. But here's the shift. Boundaries are not selfish. They are protective. They protect our energy, our well-being, our ability to show up fully. Without boundaries, many people begin to feel exhausted, resentful, stretched too thin. And for many of us, we felt that. So we begin seeing boundaries differently, not as something that pushes people away, but something that allows us to show up more fully. Question 7. Our next question is, how do I say no without hurting people? Many people struggle here. We don't want to damage relationships. We genuinely want to be supportive. So we soften our no or avoid it altogether. And for many of us, that creates more tension over time because what isn't said clearly often shows up later in frustration. So instead of softening or avoiding what needs to be said, we begin saying it clearly. Clarity is kindness to others and to ourselves. We can say, I can't take that on right now. Simple, honest, clear. And over time, that clarity builds trust. How do I know when to say yes or no? Many people want clarity here. We don't always know what the right decision is. And for many of us, we've said yes when something in us felt unsure, or no when something in us might have been open. And over time, that can leave us feeling a little out of alignment. In those moments, it helps to use a filter. Does this align with who I am? Does it support what matters most? Do I have the energy for it? Do I feel peace when I think about it? When we slow down enough to ask those questions, we begin making decisions with more clarity. And that clarity becomes kindness to others and to ourselves. Question 9. Why do I still feel exhausted when I'm trying to do the right things? This is an ordinary feeling. We're trying, we're showing up, we're doing what we believe is right, and still we feel tired. And for many of us, this is where something important begins to come into focus. We may still be saying yes more often than we have the energy for. We may be giving without fully restoring. It's not only about what we say yes to. Sometimes it's also about what we don't give ourselves permission to do, to pause, to stop, to rest before we feel completely depleted. So, even when our intentions are good, our capacity becomes stretched. This is where we begin to see something more clearly. Boundaries matter, but boundaries aren't only external. They're also internal, and they should include the boundaries we set around our own energy and restoration. Which means this. It's not just about learning when to say no. It's also about learning when to stop and when to rest. Rest is not laziness. It's restoration. It restores our energy and it allows us to show up with presence. And without it, even good intentions can quietly lead to burnout. Sometimes rest looks like stillness, and sometimes it simply looks like giving yourself permission to stop. Question 10. How do I let go of guilt, shame, or things I still carry? Many people carry things quietly. Regret, mistakes, moments we wish we could redo. And for many of us, even when life moves forward, we're still holding on to something. So how do we begin letting that go? It usually doesn't start with trying to force ourselves to move on. It begins with something much simpler. We begin by acknowledging what we're carrying, not pushing it away, not minimizing it, but actually allowing ourselves to see it clearly. Then we begin asking a different question. Not, how do I get rid of this? But, what am I still believing about myself because of this? Because often what we're holding on to is not just the event, it's the meaning we attached to it. And this is where forgiveness begins, not as forgetting, not as pretending it didn't matter or didn't happen, but as releasing the belief that we need to keep carrying it. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it gives us back our future, including self-forgiveness, letting go of the belief that we need to keep holding on to something to prove we care or to prove we've learned. Sometimes the next step is simply this. We acknowledge it, we learn from it, and then gradually we begin allowing ourselves to put it down. And over time, we begin to realize we don't honor the past by carrying it forever. We honor it by becoming wiser because of it. As we move through this next week, try not to focus on just getting it right. Instead, focus on noticing. What am I noticing about myself? What am I learning about myself? What am I practicing? When did I react? When did I pause? And when did I respond in a way that felt aligned with who I want to be? And when I didn't, what can I learn from that? Not with judgment, with awareness. Because awareness creates space, space to notice what we do, space to know who we are, and space to see who we are becoming. And often, growth begins there, not in perfection, but in noticing. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your willingness to learn, reflect, and grow. Over the next 2 weeks, you'll be exploring modules 5 and 6 as we continue looking toward who we are becoming. Take care, and we'll see you next time.